From York to White Oak, Uniontown to State College, this is Lincoln Radio Journal. On this edition, the 2018 state budget season officially got underway this past week with the governor's budget address. David Taylor is here with a Capitol Watch look at all the taxes and spending on Tom Wolf's wish list. And state and local governments are rolling out the red carpet for Amazon, but want to heap another tax on the Marcellus shale gas industry. I'll have a town hall commentary on governments picking winners and losers. I'm Lowman Henry, and welcome to Lincoln Radio Journal. We'll get to our Capitol Watch crew in just a couple of minutes, but first, news headlines from PAtownhall.com. The Supreme Court of the United States this past week refused to block a Pennsylvania state Supreme Court ruling invalidating the state's congressional district lines. 4 Democratic state Supreme Court justices have ruled the Republican-drawn congressional district maps violate the state constitution. The denial of a stay requested by Republican legislative leadership plunged this year's congressional elections into chaos. Under the state Supreme Court's ruling, the Republican-controlled legislature had until this past Friday to draw new district lines. Governor Tom Wolf then has up to 2 weeks to agree to the plan. If, as expected, the governor and the legislature cannot agree on new maps, then the state Supreme Court will impose its own redistricting scheme. All of this complicated the process of electing the state's congressional delegation, as the petitioning process for candidates to get their names on the May primary ballot was scheduled to begin this week. That process has already been delayed due to the court's unprecedented action. In related developments, GOP legislative leaders have called on at least 2 of the state Supreme Court justices who ruled in that congressional redistricting case to recuse themselves. During their campaigns for the bench, those justices spoke out forcefully against the redistrict plan that has been in place since 2012. This, according to the lawmakers, biased their judgment. That recusal is unlikely, so another lawmaker, State Representative Chris Dush of Jefferson County, is planning to introduce articles of impeachment against the judges, who he claims have violated their oaths of office by failing to uphold the constitutional requirement for the legislature to draw congressional district maps. While the outcome of the mapping process is unsure, the issue has triggered a major power struggle between Pennsylvania's legislative and judicial branches. One of Pittsburgh's oldest radio stations, KQV-AM, went off the air at the end of 2017, but it may be back later this year. The Tribune-Review reports Robert and Ashley Stevens of Broadcast Communications, Inc. have bought the station and hope to return with its all-news format later this year. Broadcast Communications owns a number of stations in western Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Maryland, many of whom air Lincoln Radio Journal and our nationally syndicated program, American Radio Journal. The Stevens say they are working on a business model that would enable the venerable station to deliver a quality product while being profitable. Stay tuned. Read about these stories and more at PAtownhall.com. Once again, Governor Tom Wolf is proposing a massive increase in state spending and the taxes needed to pay for it. His budget address this past week sets in motion the 2018-2019 budget-making process, which will be complicated by election year politics. Here to sort through the governor's proposals is our Capitol Watch crew, David Taylor of the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association, Matthew Brouillette from the Commonwealth Partners Chamber of Entrepreneurs, and Kevin Shivers from the National Federation of Independent Business. David?
And welcome once again to Capitol Watch, where we keep an eye on what's happening under the Capitol Dome in Harrisburg for you. I'm your host, David Taylor, President and CEO of the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. With me in the studio, Kevin Shivers, Executive State Director for the National Federation of Independent Business. Kevin, thanks for being on the program.
Great to be with you again, David.
And as ever, our great ally, Matt Brouillette, President and CEO of Commonwealth Partners, the Chamber of Entrepreneurs. Matt, thanks for being on the show.
Hey, good to be with you guys.
Well, it's been a very consequential week in Harrisburg, that the annual rite of the governor presenting the budget address and his spending and policy plan for the upcoming year. First takes from you guys. Matt, you go.
Well, if it's not going to be substantive, it may as well be short because that's precisely what we got. I think the shortest budget address in history, at least that anybody can remember. I think totality about 17 minutes, which probably 3 or 4 or 5 of that was Tom Wolfe jumping on the Eagles bandwagon and donning an Eagles cap.
That's the Philadelphia Eagles NFL team.
Oh, yeah. They won the World Series. No, it was the Super Bowl.
Wow.
I'm pretty sure that somebody had to remind Tom Wolfe which sport it actually was.
There's been a lot of criticism of Governor Wolfe in the 17-minute budget presentation that he had before the legislature. And my question is, if you're not going to sign a budget, why put any energy into the proposal,
so 17
right?
minutes was too long, actually, since he hasn't signed one
if
yet.
there have been 3 budgets that have gone into law without his signature. So, if you're going to let that happen, then why put any energy into the presentation?
The paradox, though, that he, in his address, is taking credit for things that were funded through those budgets which he did not sign.
Literally priorities that went into law that he didn't call for.
Well, actually campaigned against because
Yes.
you remember he was saying there is no pension crisis as a candidate. He said we don't need to do anything to our liquor system that's in complete state control. But here he was championing some pension reform and some modernization. We finally have wine in grocery stores. Of course, he vetoed substantive pension reform and substantive liquor privatization back in 2015. But he took a lot of that time in his budget address to take some victory laps on things that he was opposed to.
Yeah, it's very much like the rooster taking credit for the sunrise.
Yes, indeed it does. And, I look at the presentation and it was, very, even though it was 17 minutes long on rhetoric, this victory lap we've been talking about, but very short on detail. Not once in the presentation did he talk about, his plans for raising revenue. He was very short in terms of what his spending priorities were in each of the areas.
I don't
the
think
state
there
budget.
were any numbers.
Yeah, that was
presented.
really striking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like a top line narrative, and to literally tell the legislature, if you want to find out what's in it, you're going to have to go to my website or look in the book.
Well, it's like my kids coming to me and talking about this, something they want, but never telling me, here's how much it costs, Dad, which I understand why he didn't want to say that, because he proposed a spending plan that would grow by 4%, add over $3.3 billion to the state spending plan, from 81-something billion to over $84 billion. This while wages have been growing less than 1%, state income less than 2%. So he's depending, of course, on new taxes, new fees. So he didn't want to explain all that. It was really, I think, a re-election budget address to try to kind of say, hey, everything is fine and dandy. Let's move on. Look away.
The only issue I would take with your statement on his presentation, they aren't new taxes because it's the same old list.
Well,
of
and I was
taxes.
just going to say that it's the Tom Wolfe hit parade of bad ideas and magical thinking that magical thinking in a number of cases. First of all, he trots out the idea of a new additional tax on energy above all the taxes that are already in place, as if it's what kind of tax you have versus the overall cost of doing business here versus someplace else. Magical thinking in putting out a hike in the minimum wage.
Well, and there's no strategy behind his plan for these taxes. One of the things that I thought was completely absent in his presentation is his plan. What does he want Pennsylvania to look like? The next 4 years, 8 years, 10 years, 20 years. There was no vision offered by the governor. And it's when you're establishing tax policy, there needs to be a vision behind that about what your plans are. How are you going to use the money?
What kind of trajectory do you want to put the Commonwealth on?
Exactly.
The problem is his policy agenda is Illinois, which has been utterly destroyed. So that's probably not a really good vision to paint, Kevin, and why you would avoid doing that.
But it's, we're going to impose an impact fee or a severance tax in Pennsylvania because other states are doing it. And it's, the industries that he's choosing to levy these taxes on are the only industries that are actually doing well in Pennsylvania.
Hey, wait, there's something moving. Let's tax it.
That's exactly right. And, you not only this natural gas severance tax, but, you also had pointed out a minute ago the governor proposed a minimum wage increase. And, again, besides the natural gas industry, the only other industry that really was growing in Pennsylvania, according to IRS data, is the travel, leisure, tourism sector, basically restaurants and hotels, entertainment, that kind of thing. And those are industries that are heavily reliant on low-skilled workers, entry-level positions. And so, now you're going to those industries, which are the only ones that are doing well, and we're going to say, all right, we're going to tap your resources. And, anytime you raise the cost of labor, employers are going to need less of it.
Businesses already respond to the marketplace when there's, a lack of employees to hire. They will automatically raise wages in order to attract higher skilled people. And so whether you're a big coffee shop, national, international, or a McDonald's or a Walmart, you're going to be able to pay a higher wage in order to attract more skilled employees. You don't need the government to do that. But who it really hurts are the small entrepreneurs, particularly in difficult areas where you're trying to attract investment. And we've got a lot of these in Pennsylvania, right?
Sure.
With the steel and coal and other communities that are struggling. You're simply not going to encourage small businesses, whether it's a coffee shop or a pizza shop or something else, to come into your community if you're saying, hey, the people you're going to employ, you got to pay them $12 or $15 right out of the gate when you're selling $2 cups of coffee or $5 pizzas. The economics just don't work. But it's a great soundbite, and that unfortunately is where this governor, he's settled on sound bites, not the reality of the marketplace.
You're listening to Capital Watch. I'm your host, David Taylor from Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. With me, Kevin Shivers from Pennsylvania NFIB and Matt Brouillette from Commonwealth Partners. So I wasn't done with unfortunately with the whole catalog of magical thinking that somehow that we can plunder the energy sector and cook the goose that lays the golden eggs and expect to still have golden eggs, that we're gonna have government mandated wage increases that are actually going to destroy jobs and leave entry level working people with less money, but also that this is that really sticks in my craw. You've got the magical thinking of new tax rules that somehow that we need to claw back more from the business community by having the State Department of Revenue assess Pennsylvania business tax liability on things that happen in other states.
It's a job killer, and it's literally raising serious liability questions for businesses in Pennsylvania. So the idea behind this is that if you're a Pennsylvania company and you contract with somebody from Maryland to provide you a service or a good, and so that company in Maryland sends you an invoice for $5,000 and you return a check to them made out for $4,900, and that company in Maryland says, hey, wait a minute, the contract we signed was for $5,000 and where's my $5,000? And that Pennsylvania company says, oh no, I had to remit that extra $100 to the Department of Revenue for you for income taxes that you owe the state. Well, how does that Pennsylvania company even know what type of taxes are owed by that Maryland business? That Maryland business might have losses that they'll apply towards their income taxes. There could be other expenses that are along the way. And
well, you see, Kevin, this is your problem. You're thinking here in a holistic, real-world way that incorporates all the factors. You're not looking at it from what maximizes collections to the Pennsylvania Department of Revenue.
Well,
this is why the State Department of Revenue ought not to have these powers, and it's also why we need to focus on the fact that there are 50 states. The states are sovereign. The states have different tax policies with different kinds of taxes, with different rates, with different definitions, with different tests of applicability. It is impossible for two states to have the exact same system of taxation, and therefore these kinds of comparisons are just not applicable. So if we would give the State Department of Revenue these powers, then essentially tax compliance, predictability of tax compliance goes out the window. And every time you sit down with the Department of Revenue, it's going to be a negotiation as to how they are going to choose to assess your operations in other states. And of course, there's an inherent bias. Pennsylvania Department of Revenue, it's in the name. They're there to generate revenue.
And what's worse, David, is that last year, tax changes that the Department of Revenue and the Wolf administration called for actually make it harder for you to win an appeal on tax liability.
That's
so
right.
if the department comes out to you and says you owe money and you say no, I don't, well, even if you don't owe that money, the department through the appeals process has made it harder for you to win.
Right.
So it's not that you're not entitled to recover that money.
Right.
It's that we're going to make it harder for you. We're
And
gonna
more
shorten
expensive.
We're going to shorten the appeals
Lawyers,
process.
accountants, all that.
And that's actually law. So now not only are they looking to collect more money, but then they're going to make it harder for you to actually collect back, claw back on your own what you are entitled to.
Well, see, I get, hearing you guys talk about this issue makes me realize that Kevin, in fact, Governor Wolf does have a vision because this ties in with his severance tax because he is saying that if we impose a severance tax on natural gas companies in Pennsylvania, this is how we collect taxes from Texas.
Yeah.
He actually made this argument in his budget address that this isn't going to be paid by Pennsylvanians. Of course, the people that work in the industry or people who, heat their homes at 2.7 million homes that are heated with natural gas. He's saying that we're going to tax Texas this way. How he comes to that economic conclusion, I have no idea.
Magical
but it ties
thinking.
right in. Yeah, it's that magical thinking you're talking about, David.
Another major issue, the Independent Fiscal Office has reported that over the next decade, we're going to see 180,000 working age Pennsylvanians that are leaving the state. That means they're taking their salaries and their purchasing power with them. So we're going to actually watch literally billions of dollars in tax revenues that are disappearing because those working age Pennsylvanians are looking for jobs in other places where the jobs exist.
Yeah, and there's a barometer. It's a diagnostic tool. It's United Van Lines. That their data over time has been tested, and actually it's a sufficiently large sample because they're a national company that it tracks with census numbers, but instead you can get it month to month in real time. And Pennsylvania continues to be a high outflow and a high out migration state.
Yes.
To the point where last year that Pennsylvania experienced net population loss.
Yeah, we lost 500 residents per week in 2016. With them went nearly $3 billion in income. And if not for the really worst policies in New York and New Jersey, we wouldn't have gone to the fifth largest state. The only thing that Pennsylvania has going for it are, these bad actors like Illinois.
And that Illinois has collapsed.
More,
Illinois' exodus is
but
even more
that's
pronounced.
the problem is that you've got other states that are being far more hospitable to capital. And if that capital is mobile, it's leaving Pennsylvania. And Tom Wolf is doing very little to improve our situation.
Well, and I hate to bring up another bit of bad news, but it can't be avoided, that the Federal Tax Cuts and Jobs Act has really a lot of good stuff. Number one, it's going to help American companies to bring back their earnings from overseas to reinvest in the U.S., maybe $2 trillion or more. So we're in a window of time when there's going to be massive capital reinvestment in American production and American hiring. It also helps the tax bill helps at the federal level with expensing, that it accelerates depreciation so that it makes it easier for businesses to invest in new capacity, new equipment. Well, Governor Wolf ordered the State Department of Revenue to prevent those benefits from flowing through state tax policy, and even more, that he disallowed the state benefit entirely. So it's like we're going to be in a window of time when everybody in America is looking at where can we go to reinvest these dollars that have been stranded overseas, and that the Wolf administration is putting in place a sore thumb only place in the country where you are being disallowed the tax benefit. And so it's like saying just go to Indiana.
Yeah.
Just go.
It's a sour grape strategy intended for to make a political statement. You have a president, not of this governor's party, and there is an intent to create wealth by growing the economy. The governor has decided that he doesn't want Pennsylvania companies to have the same advantages with their tax law as businesses in other states.
Well, it's infuriating, and unfortunately, it's business as usual, and it's exactly what we've seen out of this governor and this administration the whole time he's been in office.
Well, fortunately, Pennsylvanians will have an opportunity in November to decide whether or not to stay the course with a governor that doesn't have a vision except to raise taxes and spend more and bigger government. Or if we're going to take a different direction. And so thankfully, I think we're going to be able to make a choice here. We only get to do it every 4 years. And I hope folks take notice and look at what Tom Wolf has been doing, because we're going to get more of it if he's reelected.
And that's right. And as ever, I will admonish the listeners, representative self-government is not a spectator sport. You have to live your life with your brain turned on, choose to be informed, and get involved in the process. And so we thank you for listening to Capitol Watch as part of that ongoing education. Kevin, where can people go to learn more about you and your organization and the things that you're doing?
Sure. They can visit nfib.com/PA, or they can join the conversation on Twitter at NFIB_PA.
And Matt, where can people find you?
Yeah, the best place to have a conversation is Facebook.com/Commonwealth Partners.
Outstanding. And as ever, listeners know you can find me online at PAManufacturers.org, and on Sunday mornings on the Pennsylvania Cable Network with my program PMA Perspective. So thanks to all of you for listening, and from Kevin and Matt and me, we'll catch you next time on Capitol Watch. And now, a town hall commentary from Lowman Henry.
Thank you, David. It sounds like an economic developer's dream. Over 243,000 direct and spin-off jobs with a core job average salary of $93,000 per year and the injection of billions of dollars into the state's economy. No doubt state, county, and local governments will rush in with a wide array of incentives to secure that business for good old Pennsylvania. Such is what is happening as Pittsburgh and Philadelphia enter the next round of competition to be the site of Amazon's second national headquarters, or HQ2. But the business I just described is not Amazon. It is the Marcellus Shell industry. Economic development policy in Pennsylvania is anything but consistent. It picks winners and losers, often based more on political considerations than economic viability. This has resulted in numerous examples of the state offering tax abatements and even loans, which ended up in default, or the business simply leaving when the incentives end. There is no more stark comparison than the state's hostile approach to the Marcellus Shell development and its courtship of Amazon. State, county, and local governments are willing to give away the proverbial store to get HQ2, yet are intent on heaping punitive tax upon punitive tax on the Marcellus Shell industry. To be sure, neither Amazon nor the energy companies need special treatment. They are all highly profitable, growing businesses with bright futures. Marcellus Shell drillers and Amazon are each perfectly capable of paying the same taxes and operating under the same laws and regulations that every other business, large and small, operates under in Pennsylvania. But that's not how we do things here in Penns Woods. Ironically, our state's approach to economic development was best summed up by Ronald Reagan when he said, "If it moves, tax it. If it keeps moving, regulate it. If it stops moving, subsidize it." Blessed with rich deposits of natural gas, the industry in the Marcellus Shell region developed rapidly without the assistance of government economic development handouts. It being successful, following Reagan's dictum, state government decided to tax it. And so a severance tax, misnamed an impact fee, was placed on the industry. It continued to be successful, so more regulations were imposed. Meanwhile, the clever folks at Amazon are masterfully playing states and cities against each other. Already one of the most successful businesses in the world, Amazon could simply have picked a location for HQ2 and announced it would locate there. But why do that when you can ignite a bidding frenzy? And so, for now, Pittsburgh and Philadelphia are filling goodie bags with incentives in the hope of landing the high-paying jobs and economic benefits that will flow from HQ2. Unfortunately, we, the taxpayers, don't know how much of our wealth they're giving away, as the process thus far has been completely devoid of transparency. Thus, economic development policy in Pennsylvania continues to penalize success while attempting to entice new businesses into the Commonwealth by offering to have them pay less than their fair share of the tax burden when they get here. Fair warning to Amazon, though, once you're here and become even more successful, look for the welcome mat to be pulled out from under you. Despite the wide array of incentives being offered to Amazon, they are unlikely to select Pittsburgh or Philadelphia for HQ2. There is no doubt both cities have the educational institutions, workforces, and infrastructure needed to meet Amazon's needs. What Pennsylvania lacks, however, is a state tax structure that is competitive with other states. The most recent edition of the American Legislative Exchange Council's Rich States, Poor States report ranks Pennsylvania 39th among the 50 states in an economic competitiveness study. Other states in the Amazon competition, including Indiana, Tennessee, and Florida, rank in the top 10. Of course, New Jersey and New York are at the bottom of the list, giving the Keystone State some reason for hope. The disparate treatment of various businesses and the lack of state competitiveness point to a need for Pennsylvania county and municipal governments to reassess their approach to economic development. At the state level, onerous tax rates, job-crushing regulations, and dysfunctional bureaucracy must be addressed. The picking of winners and losers and offering incentive packages to compensate for an uncompetitive tax and regulatory environment must end. Instead, we must cut taxes, eliminate over-regulation, and streamline the bureaucracy to create a business climate that is competitive, welcoming, and fair to all. With a town hall commentary, I'm Lowman Henry. If you miss hearing Lincoln Radio Journal on your favorite radio station, audio of our complete program is available on our websites, lincolnradiojournal.com and lincolninstitute.org. For 23 years, Lincoln Radio Journal has been heard on public affairs-minded radio stations throughout the Commonwealth, including WPHB-AM in Phillipsburg, WJAS-AM in Pittsburgh, along with WHKS-FM in Port Allegheny, Pennsylvania. The Pennsylvania Leadership Conference this year will be held April 6th and 7th at the Radisson Penn Harris Convention Center in Camp Hill. The Pennsylvania Leadership Conference, of course, is the premier conservative event each year here in the Keystone State. This year's featured dinner speaker will be Fox News contributor Byron York. There will be a wide array of speakers, including former U.S. Senator Tom Coburn, along with issue panels and workshops. You can get complete information and register for this year's Pennsylvania Leadership Conference at paleadershipconference.org. The Lincoln Radio Journal is produced weekly by the Lincoln Institute of Public Opinion Research, Incorporated. The Lincoln Institute is completely funded through the generosity of individuals, corporations, and philanthropic foundations. They include the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association, the Allegheny Foundation of Pittsburgh, the Houston Foundation of Coatesville, and the Worrell Foundation of Carlisle, all of whom have helped to underwrite the costs of this program. Lincoln Radio Journal is a trademark of the Lincoln Institute of Public Opinion Research, Incorporated. Comments and opinions expressed on this program are those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Lincoln Institute or of this radio station. From the Lincoln Broadcast Center in Harrisburg, I'm Lowman Henry. Thank you for listening to Pennsylvania's most widely broadcast public affairs radio program, Lincoln Radio Journal. Plug into the pulse of Pennsylvania.